I'm telling this because I need someone to know what happened. And because I'm still trying to process the fact that I met myself as an old man 3 weeks ago. My name is Chris Matthews, I'm 32 years old, and I live in a small house in Portland, Oregon with my wife Jenny and our 4-year-old daughter Emma. The old man showed up on a Tuesday evening, standing across the street under the oak tree, just watching our house with an expression I can only describe as profound sadness. When I finally got close enough to see his face clearly, I nearly passed out because it was my face, just aged about 40 years with the same distinctive scar on my left eyebrow and the exact same lopsided smile I see in the mirror every morning. It started during Emma's bedtime routine. I was reading her favorite book about the hungry caterpillar when I noticed through her bedroom window that someone was standing across the street. Portland's a safe neighborhood, but it's not unusual to see people walking their dogs or standing around, so I didn't think much of it at first. But after I finished the story and tucked Emma in, I glanced out the window again and the person was still there, hadn't moved an inch. Something about his stillness felt wrong, deliberate, like he was specifically watching our house rather than just hanging out. I went downstairs and mentioned it to Jenny, who was doing dishes in the kitchen. She dried her hands and came to look through the living room window with me, but by then, the streetlight had come on and we could see him more clearly. "That's weird," she said, squinting at the figure. "He's been there for like 20 minutes. Should we call someone?" I told her to wait, that I'd go check it out first. Maybe he was lost or needed help. I grabbed a jacket and headed outside, trying to look casual but feeling my heart rate pick up. As I crossed the street, the man didn't move or acknowledge me, just kept staring at my house with this intense focus. When I got within about 10 feet, I called out, "Hey man, you okay? Can I help you with something?" That's when he slowly turned his head to look at me and I felt the world tilt sideways. The face looking back at me was mine in every detail that mattered. Same nose that's a bit too large, same green eyes with a little brown fleck in the left one, same slightly crooked front tooth. The scar above his left eyebrow was identical to the one I got falling off my bike when I was 7. He was older, sure, probably in his early 70s, with deep wrinkles and white hair. But the bone structure, the expression, even the way he held his shoulders, was exactly like looking in one of those aging apps, except this was real and standing in front of me. "Chris," he said, and his voice had the same slight rasp mine gets when I'm tired. "I know this is going to sound insane, but I'm you from 42 years in the future. And I came back to warn you about something that's going to happen tomorrow." I just stood there, mouth open, brain completely short-circuiting. Every rational thought in my head was screaming that this was impossible, that time travel doesn't exist, that this had to be some kind of elaborate prank, or that I was having a psychotic break. But he knew things he shouldn't have known. He mentioned the name of my childhood dog that I never talk about because it makes me too sad. He described the exact location of a birthmark on my back that nobody can see unless I'm shirtless. He even knew about the recurring nightmare I've had since I was 12, the one about drowning in a room that's filling with water. "I know you're freaking out," he said gently. "I remember being you right now, standing here trying to process this, so I'm going to make it simple. Tomorrow afternoon at 3:17 p.m., Emma is going to have an accident that changes everything." The mention of Emma snapped me out of my shock. "What kind of accident?" I demanded, moving closer. "What happens to her?" He held up his hands in a calming gesture and explained that in his timeline, his original timeline, Emma had been playing in the backyard tomorrow afternoon while he'd been distracted by a work call. She'd climbed the old apple tree near the back fence, the one Jenny had been asking him to cut down for months, and she'd fallen. The fall had caused a severe spinal injury that left her partially paralyzed for life. "I spent 40 years living with that guilt," he said, his voice breaking. 40 years watching my daughter struggle with a disability that was entirely preventable if I'd just been paying attention or had cut down that damn tree when Jenny asked. It destroyed our marriage within 5 years, and Emma. She never blamed me out loud, but I could see it in her eyes every time I visited. He pulled out a wallet and showed me a photo, a picture of Emma as a teenager in a wheelchair, and the resemblance was unmistakable, even though she looked sad in a way my Emma never does. I asked him how he was here, how time travel was even possible, and he said he didn't fully understand it himself. Apparently, in 2074, some kind of technology becomes available through private medical companies. Something about quantum consciousness transfer that can send your mind back into your younger body for brief periods. It's expensive as hell and technically illegal because of the timeline contamination risks, but desperate old men with nothing to lose find ways. He said he'd sold everything he owned, liquidated his retirement, and gone to some underground facility in what used to be Seattle to make this happen. I have maybe 30 minutes before I snap back to my own time, he said, checking a device on his wrist that looked like a watch, but wasn't. I know you probably think this could create some kind of paradox. That if you prevent the accident, then I never have a reason to come back, but honestly, I don't care anymore. If preventing Emma's injury means I never exist, that this version of me just dissolves, then that's a fair trade. His eyes were wet with tears. You get to keep your daughter whole, keep your marriage intact, keep the life I lost, that's all that matters. I wanted to believe him, but I also felt like I was losing my grip on reality. How do I know this isn't just some elaborate scam? I asked. Maybe you're some con artist who did research on me and you're after something. He smiled sadly and said, look at your right ankle. At the small mole you have there, now look at mine. We both pulled up our pant legs, and there it was, the same distinctive mole in the exact same spot. I know you have a password for your work computer that you've never told anyone, not even Jenny, he continued. It's Lighthouse 47, because that's where you proposed to her. At the lighthouse up in Heseda Head, and 47 was your dad's favorite number. He was right, completely right, and that password was something I'd never spoken aloud or written down anywhere. Tomorrow at 3:17, you're going to get a call from your boss about the Henderson project, and you're going to be so focused on that call that you don't hear Emma go outside. I need you to cut down that tree tonight, or at the very least, don't take that call. Stay with her. I stood there processing everything, looking at this old man who claimed to be me, who knew impossible things and was pleading with me to save my daughter from an accident that hadn't happened yet. Part of me wanted to call the police, to have him checked out for mental illness or investigated for stalking. But a bigger part, the part that was a father, couldn't risk it. What if he was telling the truth and I ignored him and Emma got hurt because I was too skeptical? Okay, I finally said. I'll cut down the tree tonight and tomorrow. I won't take any calls when Emma's playing outside. The relief that washed over his face was so profound it almost hurt to see. Thank you, he whispered. You have no idea what this means to have a chance to fix the biggest mistake of my life. He started to fade slightly, becoming translucent, and he reached out like he wanted to hug me but couldn't make contact. Tell Emma I love her, he said as he continued to dissolve. Tell her every single day. And don't take any moment with her for granted because time goes faster than you think. I asked if I'd remember this conversation, if there would be any proof, and he said probably not. That most temporal interventions edit themselves out of memory within hours. But you'll have a feeling tomorrow, he said, barely visible now. A strong instinct to stay close to Emma, to not let her out of your sight, trust that feeling. Then he was gone, completely vanished like he'd never been there, and I was standing alone under the oak tree. I went back inside feeling completely disoriented. Jenny asked what happened with the guy outside, and I almost told her everything, but something stopped me. How do you explain to your wife that you just met your future self who traveled back in time to prevent your daughter from being paralyzed? She'd think I was having a breakdown, and honestly, maybe I was. Instead, I told her it was just some confused old guy who wandered off, no big deal. That night after Jenny went to bed, I went out to the backyard and looked at the apple tree. It was old and kind of scraggly, and Jenny had been right that it needed to come down. We just kept putting it off because it was a big job. I got my saw and my ladder from the garage and spent the next 3 hours cutting it down, working by flashlight, sawing through branches, and finally the trunk. By the time I was done, it was 2 a.m, and I was exhausted and covered in sawdust, but the tree was gone. Jenny found me the next morning standing in the backyard looking at the stump. You finally did it, she said, bringing me coffee. What got into you? I told her I couldn't sleep and decided to just take care of it, that it had been bothering me. She kissed my cheek and said she was proud of me for following through, that it would make the yard safer for Emma. I didn't tell her that I'd done it because an old man who claimed to be me from the future had told me our daughter would fall from it today. The day went by normally, but I found myself hovering around Emma more than usual. At 3:15, my boss did call about the Henderson project, exactly like old me had predicted, and I felt this chill run down my spine. I let it go to voicemail and stayed focused on Emma, who was playing with her dolls in the living room. At 3:17 exactly, she looked up at me and said, Daddy, can we play outside? I suggested we play a board game instead, and she happily agreed. Later that evening, after Emma was asleep, I went back outside and stood where the tree had been. I tried to remember the old man's face, the exact words he'd said. But it was getting fuzzy, like trying to recall a dream. By the next morning, I could barely remember him at all. Just had this vague sense that something important had happened the night I cut down the tree. The only concrete memory that stuck was the overwhelming feeling that I needed to stay close to Emma that day, and I had. A week later, I found something in my jacket pocket that I don't remember putting there. It was a small piece of paper with just 4 words written in handwriting that looked eerily like mine. "You saved her. Thank you." I showed it to Jenny and asked if she put it there, but she had no idea what I was talking about. I kept that note, put it in my wallet, even though I couldn't quite remember why it felt so important. Sometimes late at night, I have these fragmented memories of a conversation with someone who looked like me but older. I can't recall the details, can't remember what we talked about or why, but I wake up with this intense gratitude for my life, for Emma being healthy and whole, for Jenny still being by my side. My therapist says it might be anxiety manifesting as protective instincts, that becoming a parent can trigger these intense fear scenarios that our brain plays out to keep us vigilant. But I don't think that's what it is. I think something happened that night under the oak tree. Something that broke the rules of time and space because a future version of me loved his daughter enough to risk everything to save her. I think I met myself as an old man filled with regret, and he gave me the one gift that mattered most: the chance to avoid his mistakes. Even though the memory has faded, even though I can't prove any of it really happened, I know on some fundamental level that Emma was saved from something terrible. I cut down an old tree on a random Tuesday night for reasons I can barely remember now. But every time I look at Emma running and jumping and living her life completely unhindered, I feel this deep certainty that I made the right choice. Maybe I'll never know for sure if that old man was real or just some kind of stress-induced hallucination, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that Emma is okay, and I'm here paying attention, being present, not taking a single moment for granted. Thanks for listening to this story about meeting yourself across time and the lengths we'd go to protect the people we love. If this tale of temporal intervention and fatherly devotion resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to Time Traveling Stories for more narratives that explore the bonds that transcend time itself. Drop a comment sharing what you would change if your future self came back with a warning. Don't forget that notification bell so you never miss our next journey into the stories that make you appreciate every moment you have with the people who matter most.